So, you want to change a society that's built on a foundation of systemic, violent oppression. What's your strategy? Well, if you're the American civil rights movement, you land on an idea so counterintuitive it borders on insanity. You fight overwhelming physical force by not fighting at all. This wasn't about being passive. Oh no, this was strategic, disciplined, psychological warfare. The goal wasn't to win a brawl in an alley, it was to win a debate on the national stage, using your opponent's own brutality as your most compelling argument. You let them show the world exactly who they are, live on the 6 o'clock news. It's a bold plan, relying entirely on your opponent's complete lack of self-control. A surprisingly safe bet, as it turns out.
It all famously kicks off with Rosa Parks, but the Montgomery bus boycott was anything but a spontaneous event. The Women's Political Council, led by Joanne Robinson, had been planning for a moment like this for years. When Parks was arrested, they printed and distributed over 50,000 leaflets overnight. The response was immediate. For 381 days, the Black community of Montgomery just walked. They organized a staggeringly complex carpool system with dispatch stations and volunteer drivers, essentially creating their own parallel transit system. People called them the rolling churches. Meanwhile, the city's bus company was bleeding money because it turns out a business model based on alienating a huge portion of your customer base is, from a financial perspective, dumb. Who knew?
This early success led to the formation of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC. This was the strategic nerve center. And a key figure here, often overlooked, was James Lawson. Lawson was a Methodist minister who had studied Gandhi's techniques in India. He returned to the States and started running workshops. Not on fundraising or public speaking. He ran workshops on how to endure abuse, how to protect your head when being kicked, how to curl into a ball, how to remain limp during an arrest. They practiced these scenarios, role-playing as mobs and police. This wasn't just marching. This was a trained, disciplined corps of activists preparing for battle by learning how to lose it gracefully. The preparation was meticulous, bordering on theatrical. Then came the sit-ins. February 1st, 1960. 4 college freshmen from North Carolina A&T walk into a Woolworths, buy some school supplies, and then sit at the whites-only lunch counter. They were polite, they were well-dressed, they asked for coffee, and they were refused. So they just sat there, reading, until the store closed. The next day, they came back with more students. The day after, even more. The rules were simple. No striking back, no talking back, just sit. Soon, they were being heckled, shoved, and having food dumped on them. Apparently, the greatest existential threat to the Southern way of life was a black student calmly trying to order a cup of coffee. The sheer panic was something to behold. In 1961, the Supreme Court had already ruled that segregation in interstate travel was unconstitutional. Twice. So the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, decided to see if anyone in the South had actually read the memo. They organized the Freedom Rides, integrated groups of activists riding buses from Washington, D.C. to New Orleans. It was a simple compliance check. In Anniston, Alabama, one bus was surrounded by a mob, its tires were slashed, and it was firebombed while the doors were held shut. In Birmingham, another group of riders was met at the bus station by a crowd with baseball bats and iron pipes, with the local police promising to be conveniently absent for 15 minutes. The whole thing was less a compliance check and more a field trip into a failed state.
By 1963, the movement needed a big, undeniable victory. They chose Birmingham, Alabama, arguably the most segregated city in America. The plan was called Project C for confrontation. The campaign started slow, with sit-ins and arrests, including Martin Luther King Jr.'s. To reinvigorate it, organizers made a controversial call. They recruited children. On May 2nd, the Children's Crusade began. Thousands of students, some as young as 6, marched. The Commissioner of Public Safety, Bull Connor, was not a man known for his nuance. He unleashed high-pressure fire hoses that could strip bark from trees, and sent in police dogs to attack the marching kids, all of which was captured by news cameras and broadcast around the globe. He was a PR disaster in a crisp white hat.
While Bull Connor was busy providing the movement with its best promotional material, Martin Luther King Jr. was sitting in solitary confinement. A group of local white clergymen had published a statement calling the protests unwise and untimely. King, with nothing but smuggled-in newspaper margins and toilet paper, began to write a response. The result was the Letter from a Birmingham Jail, one of the most brilliant essays on civil disobedience ever written. He methodically dismantles their arguments, patiently explaining that wait almost always means never. It's a masterclass in calmly eviscerating your opponents with pure, unassailable logic while they are free and you are in a cage. Everyone remembers the "I have a dream" speech. What gets lost is the sheer logistical miracle of the event itself. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom was primarily organized by Bayard Rustin, a brilliant activist who had to stay in the background because he was openly gay. He had 2 months. He and his team coordinated over 2,000 buses, 21 chartered trains, and countless cars, bringing 250,000 people to the Lincoln Memorial. They prepared 80,000 cheese sandwiches. They dug 22 latrines. All of this was done without email, cell phones, or any of the tech we'd consider essential. They did it with clipboards and an unshakable belief that it could be done. Even after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a key piece of the puzzle was missing: voting rights. In Dallas County, Alabama, where Selma is, more than half the population was black, but less than 2% were registered to vote. So activists organized a 54-mile march from Selma to the state capital, Montgomery. On March 7, 1965, about 600 marchers led by John Lewis and Hosea Williams reached the Edmund Pettus Bridge. There, they were met by state troopers and a local posse. They were given 2 minutes to disperse before being brutally attacked with billy clubs and tear gas. The attack, dubbed Bloody Sunday, was broadcast on national television, interrupting a popular Sunday night movie. Americans were horrified. Lyndon Johnson was forced to act. It was, once again, a stunning victory born from a televised public defeat. So, why did this all work? What's the deep logic? It comes from Gandhi's concept of satyagraha, which roughly translates to truth force or soul force. The idea is that nonviolent resistance isn't passive, it's an active force. You aren't trying to humiliate or defeat your opponent, you are trying to awaken in him a sense of injustice. You do this by willingly accepting suffering without retaliating. The sight of your undeserved suffering is meant to trigger a moral crisis in the attacker and in anyone watching. You are essentially holding up a mirror and forcing your oppressor to look at their own reflection. It's an incredibly high-minded strategy that relies on the belief that even your worst enemy has a conscience somewhere.
Of course, this approach was not without its critics. Figures like Malcolm X famously derided it, advocating for self-defense by any means necessary. And you can see why. The psychological toll on the nonviolent protesters was immense. The constant abuse, the jailing, the threats. It's a superhuman level of discipline to endure that. Many in the movement, especially younger activists in groups like SNCC, grew increasingly frustrated with the slow pace of change and the sheer brutality they had to absorb. The debate between nonviolence and self-defense was a constant, powerful tension within the movement. It's easy to praise nonviolence from a comfortable chair 70 years later. It's another thing entirely to live it. In the end, nonviolent direct action worked because it perfectly exploited the new reality of television and the old reality of America's political structure. It created spectacles of injustice so vivid, so undeniable, that they couldn't be ignored. It made people sitting in their living rooms in Ohio or California feel complicit. This public pressure forced the hand of the federal government, which repeatedly had to intervene against its will to stop the chaos. The movement showed that you could, in fact, change the world by making your enemy's violence a liability instead of an asset. An incredibly powerful, infuriatingly difficult strategy that requires more patience than most of us have waiting for a website to load. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!